Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Salina Planning Commission meeting for March 3rd, 2020. First order of business is a roll call. All right. Just want to confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been provided.
It has.
Thank you. Next is the approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And on to new business. Okay. So we have administrative items. Are we ready for the administrative items? Okay.
We are, Mr. Chair.
So application P08-2B filed by Bill Shepard on the behalf of Grand Prairie Villas LLC requested approval of replat of lots 18 through 36, Block 2 of the Grand Prairie addition to the City of Salina to further subdivide these lots into 30 residential building lots. The replat area is located at the north end of the Bent Grass Drive and contains 7.73 acres. This is continued from December 17th, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chair. Yes, thank you. Pointing out that this is a continuation of an item from December 17th, 2019. Before you have a request for current Grand Prairie at 70 platted lots, zoned R1. The proposed replat would add from the existing 19 lots at 100 feet in width that are currently platted through the final plat. It would take that 19 and turn those into 30 lots with a 60-foot width, keeping the R1 zoning. The developer has identified within their application that they would like to create patio homes for 55 and older owners for that type of housing that is not necessarily available in the Salina market. A little bit of background about this property, besides the additional planning commission meetings that we've had in late 2019, it should be noted that this property is part of what was originally the master plan for the Graves Trust land. It's fairly unique in Salina as being such a large piece of land that was originally platted, planned for, including drainage, at a very early stage. And so much of the development we've been seeing in the last few years in this area is kind of the final pieces of that master plan coming into play. But unlike the original intention of having one single owner, you have various owners developing these different pieces now. So as we get a little bit more into drainage, I think the relevancy of that connection to that master plan will become just more clear and relevant. With that, based on our last meeting, the Planning Commission identified several issues that you would like to hear more from the applicant on. We have taken the materials supplied by the applicant, made that available in the packet, and I'd like to go through a few of those now. As you are familiar with, when reviewing a plat, we go through typical design review criteria. Particularly on this, I'm going to go through stormwater, fire protection, parks, which in this case we're going to talk a little bit about the golf course, and then traffic concerns in that area as those came up at previous public hearings. Specifically on storm drainage, and I think this one's critical because at previous meetings we've heard quite a bit from the Mariposa Homeowners Association and real concerns about the relationship between the Grand Prairie plat and where the water from that plat is draining and how it interacts with the drainage pond within Mariposa. So you'll find in the packet a new engineering assessment from city engineering staff, and Dan Stack, city engineer, is here and available for questions following staff report. And you'll also see an engineering analysis from the applicant's engineer, Caw Valley Engineering. So those were both provided in your packet. In addition, city staff met with members from the HOA last week to discuss their concerns from those public meetings. And really kind of where that meeting went was identifying that we have two issues here. The first one was a concern for the structural engineering integrity of the pond. Can it handle the additional density being proposed in Grand Prairie? Going from 19 lots to 30 lots would create additional impervious runoff, was the question, and that additional water going to the pond, would it be able to handle that? And the answer is yes. I think after having that discussion both with the homeowners association and through both engineers' drainage analysis, you'll find that the Mariposa drainage pond has the capacity, even in a high-risk situation like a 25-year flood situation, to handle that. And that is what our design criteria is to a 25-year flood incident. So it has the ability to handle that increased capacity, and it's not very significant. So there may be more units, but they tend to be smaller units, and so there leaves more pervious surface or green space for the water to soak into. Also, that upper portion of Grand Prairie is a little unique in the fact that not all of it directly drains into Mariposa. Some of it actually kind of goes west into the golf course, and then the other kind of goes a different direction. We'll see that in this map is a good one that John has projected, of course, was also available in your packet, and it outlines that greater drainage area. Sorry, I'm going to grab a laser pointer. So if you'll see here, this blue outline that goes around the greater master plan, it actually kind of cuts that northern peninsula there partially. So here is what is draining into the Mariposa pond, what's inside the circle. So these other portions up here are draining differently. So of the whole complete lots that are within the proposed replat here, only a portion of those actually drain into the Mariposa detention pond. Additionally, that conversation, like I said, that was kind of a two-part discussion, and the other piece is the contractual agreement that Mariposa has related to repairs of their pond between them, Cornerstone Development, and the city of Salina. So basically that agreement kind of breaks up these different duties, whether it's regular maintenance, you have repair, and what portion of the responsibility belongs to each party. Also part of that agreement was access and easement for Grand Prairie to have some additional easements through there. And having that conversation, that kind of contractual discussion really needs to be had at the city commission level, as they are the ones who are responsible for entering into an agreement like that. I feel like we left that meeting with the Mariposa Homeowners Association recognizing that from a platting perspective, the pond is safe and can handle this additional drainage. But regarding that contract, that needs to be brought up with the city commission. And you'll see that staff has made a recommendation within conditions of final plat approval that I think reflect that. So as I get through the staff report and we end on conditions, you'll see that connection there to keeping that contract at that discussion level with the city commission, but making sure that the concerns you had and the public had with revisiting that contract are not lost. With that, I'm going to move on to fire protection. Something you'll notice in your packet is, actually, John, can we go to the new plat showing or Dustin, with the new easement? Since our last meeting, the applicant is actually proposing the emergency access route would still leave from between the same two lots, but it's actually not going to go as north and then cut over. It's actually significantly shorter by about 200 feet. One that makes access emergency faster. It also does head a different spot on the golf course. So you'll see here, it's a very laser pointer intensive day. You'll see here, this is that same entrance point out of the subdivision that had previously been identified, but the last access went further up and over. This is actually cutting over much quicker and taking 200 feet off of that total length of the access road. As we get a little bit more into the golf situation, we'll talk a little bit more about how this road access interacts with the golf course and some of the things worth considering there. Additionally, on fire protection, this issue has arisen with when is the road going in, how does it get put in, some issues like that. The applicant did provide a letter through their attorney recognizing that they understand the importance of the road, what their intention is with the road. I do have to remind the Planning Commission that in order to kind of identify individual responsibilities, today we're talking about the plat. You have taken previous actions in the past to make a moratorium recommendation. That, of course, went to the City Commission, and they have acted on that in their capacity, and that process is going along, doing what it's supposed to be doing. Trying not to mix those two issues up today, but understanding that there is a connection between those. You'll also see under conditions of plat approval, staff has made a recommendation that ties these two processes together and makes sure that your recommendations and things that are happening in that situation are connected. And we can definitely get more into conditions of plat approval. You also have a letter from the fire marshal in your packet recognizing this new design and accepting it. Actually, that's the wrong one, Dustin. That's the previous one. But we went through a similar process that we had in, actually, will you please get the aerial with the golf course and the tee boxes? That one, that's a nice colorful one. But I think as we're talking about the emergency fire access road, the ideal time to talk about this in relationship is with the golf course. And there have been some concerns. I have not received any written comments at this point, but I believe some folks have had some discussions with the city manager who relayed to me that there were some questions about the golf course and how would interaction of this new route affect play. So we did try to, and we've got a graphic that's in your packet, and it just identifies the golf course itself, the fairways, each of the tee boxes are identified via color, red and yellow. And then you can see where the new proposed easement is running through that. So if you could zoom in a little, Dustin. So right here is where you see the plat ending. And basically here's where that old cart path is. And the new access road just kind of cuts right over here. And so you have a tee box here, and you have a tee box here. And it's right, this should be what's considered the yellow tee box. Thanks. There we go. That's considered the yellow tee box. The new, will you zoom in a little bit more, Dustin? Thank you. So as you can see, you've got a tee box here. The new road comes up and comes across here. So you've got this last tee box, and then you've got the fairway here. There's been questions about, well, if the road's cutting across here, what happens if we hit, you're playing and you hit this road? How is that going to affect play? I think one of the things that was identified is we have several cart paths that cross other holes on that golf course. There are other examples of other golf courses where you have even full-sized roads running through things. If you...
So can I make a correction? I found the map.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking for.
So where the road comes in from Markley, it intersects the yellow and the red. So I think you pointed to the red.
No, it's fine.
No, I mean the
media person's going to get on to me not talking into the microphone.
No, so I'm not sure why that picture's not available, but it is in the packet, so if somebody's following at home, we will try and get that. I think that's what I'm looking for. What we're trying to relay here, though, is concerns related to how does this new access route interact with these two holes. So you have hole 8 and hole 7 here. Hole 8 is running this way, hole 7 is running that way. So the access road comes up and between the blue tee and the red tee of hole 8, and then over, similar to what was a maintenance access easement here. It was used for maintenance. It was also used for the fireworks that used to be shot off here 4th of July time. And this follows that easement that was originally proposed. And so this new easement that the applicant or developer is proposing would cut along here just below that yellow tee box. Like I said, that's 200 feet shorter. There's quite a bit of text in the staff report recognizing questions about the rule of golf and how, if a ball were to hit the access road, what does that mean for the game? Does the game stop? Is it still playable? And I think what's identified is the course is still very playable. That within golf, there are lots of essentially immovable objects, whether it's a temporary body of water. I've even played on some courses where there's large pieces of art that are it's in the fairway. You either get around it or you don't. We also have feedback from our golf professionals at the golf course recognizing that this should not affect play. It should not deter golfers from being able to use the course. And specifically identified in here are several of the different holes, whether it's hole 14, hole 12, or hole 9. And I'm sorry, I should back up. Examples, and I think we should have those, are within the Salina Country Club golf course has hole 14, where you have an almost identical configuration with access roads or a maintenance road of sorts. And then you also can see at maintenance roads near the greens and fairways that require golfers to take relief can be found on holes 12 at the Salina Country Club and holes 9 at Great Life. So other golf courses that people in our community may go to, because I think one of the questions was, if this access road is here, are people still going to want to golf here? Well, if you went to other golf courses in town, you would find very similar situations, whether it's a maintenance road or an access road. I will note too, you should have at your places, and we have copies available for the public for those who wish to hear or see. We received 2 pictures at 4:20 yesterday, and they were just pictures dropped off. The person didn't identify themselves, and they provided notes on the back of the pictures, and they wanted to provide those because they were basically grass emergency access roads that were around the Kansas Historical Museum in Topeka. This is the only public comment we've received since the last meeting regarding this plat. But we did get this at the end of day yesterday after the packet already went out. I think this individual is trying to provide this as an example, and as their notes speak to, regarding emergency access roads around other environments and made of different materials. That leads me to my next topic related to the emergency access road and the golf course. Is the applicant did provide additional materials related to the geo block that they are looking to use as part of the engineered makeup of the road. These geosystems allow for grass and soil to go over that surface, be pervious, but also handle the weight and the integrity of something such as a fire truck. Both engineers have recognized the ability for this material to handle the weight of the fire truck, and our fire marshal has recognized that this material would be suitable to a certain level to handle the fire truck. And there are other examples in the state of using these types of materials. So that is there for your review. Regarding street and traffic, the applicant's engineer has provided additional information related to the ability for adjacent roads to handle the increased traffic going from 19 units to 30 units. What was most noted is based on ITE, which are standard traffic count numbers. Identified housing for 55 and older tends to produce less daily trips than what was proposed with the original 19 lots. So a significant uptick in traffic would not be an issue, and the associated roads can handle the additional capacity, and they are the appropriate roads for that type of use. So with that, reminding commissioners that we do have staff from the applicable departments here to answer any specific questions you may have on this issue. I'd like to lastly talk about staff recommendations for conditions of approval of this final plat. Conditions 1 and 2 are new and uniquely tied to the situation associated with this plat. One is, as a precondition of City Commission consideration of the replat dedications and authorizations of the mayor to sign the replat, developer and the city enter into an agreement approved by the City Commission which addresses the terms of installation of a fire apparatus access road meeting the requirements of Appendix D, Fire Apparatus Access Road of the 2012 International Fire Code as adopted by reference in the City of Salina Ordinance 16-10852. So what this condition does is ensures that the actions taken by the City Commission regarding those issues associated with the moratorium that's at that level are tied to the plat, so that the plat and the conditions for the road's installation are not separated. And it addressed the timing of that so that that must be settled before the replat can be signed. And the additional emergency access road, or not additional, the new proposed easement for the emergency access road, that easement will have to go to the City Commission. So at that point, too, it ties that new easement along with this action. Secondly, as a precondition, the City Commission consideration of the replat dedication authorization of the mayor to sign the plat, the City Commission shall review and evaluate the agreement to grant a public sanitary sewer easement and drainage facility maintenance covenants associated with the Mariposa drainage pond. And that reflects what I talked about earlier, that this is specifically identifying as a precondition for consideration of the replat that the city and Mariposa Homeowners Association would start to address the contractual relationship there related to the drainage pond, which is something the Planning Commission requested when addressing the Cedar Point issue, also something that came up with this, and I believe that this kind of ties both of those things together. At this time, staff is then ready to answer any other questions. And like I said, other members of staff are present for additional information, and the applicant is also here if you'd wish to hear from them.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a question on condition 2. So you're saying that for the replat for this one, it's going to be tied into the agreement with the Mariposa, so if there's not an agreement with Mariposa, then the replat's not going through?
So there's already an agreement.
Right.
So,
With the existing access?
correct, and the maintenance and repair relationship, they're all within that. And so both Cedar Point and this project are all part of that Graves Trust Master Plan. So this would be a way in which to put this in front of the City Commission and say, we'd like you to relook at this contract. I think Greg Bankston, City legal representation, can speak a little bit more to this Clark Mize Linville, just to kind of talk to how this would actually be implemented, Greg.
Thank you. Greg Binkson with Clark Mize and Linville, the city's legal counsel. Appreciate the chance to speak to that quickly, and I wanted to just make the point that I think needs to be made right up front. It was helpful and appreciated the opportunity to have conversation with representatives of the Mariposa Homeowners Association. And I don't know if you want me to go into all the detail right now relative to that agreement or not. But the ultimate point that I wanted to make was that, in my opinion, it's not mine to decide, but in my opinion, there is not a basis for Mariposa to require, the Mariposa Homeowners Association, to require a renegotiation of the agreement. What potentially happens when you do the math is that the question is whether anybody is harmed. When the percentages were originally arrived at, the entire basin was examined, and anywhere that it was anticipated that there would be R1 zoning and development under R1 zoning, a runoff coefficient of 0.5 was applied. There were some other percentages that applied to the R2 segment. Golf course was a different runoff coefficient, but that's how those percentages were arrived at. The question becomes whether, by virtue of this change in density, is there effect, is there a harm? It depends on how you look at it and where you're sitting. 5 was applied because they were R1s. The replat is proposed as an R1. If you're on the other side, you could say, well, appreciate all that, but there has to be some increment of increase in runoff by virtue of this potential change. Well, in the intervening time, we've been able to get that calculation. You probably saw it in your packet. The applicant's engineer analyzed that point and arrived at a runoff coefficient of 0.52. When you examine the percentages, that does adjust them in a very, by 0.1%, as it turns out. The key, though, is under that agreement, the city, if there's a need for a repair, the city has to make the repair. And the allocation has been determined under the agreement as to what is the city's share, the city at large share, as it's referred to in the agreement, compared with the combination of the Mariposa share and the Grand Prairie share that was taken on by Mariposa under the agreement. As long as the city, if the city takes the position that there's been a change and we need to modify that agreement because of that 0.1%, that's a question that I can't answer. No one in this room can answer. That's something, and that's the reason for the language in the condition as far as that having to be addressed ultimately by the City Commission. Assuming, well, as the agreement stands now, however, Mariposa, in my opinion, and by the terms of the agreement, is not harmed as long as the percentage allocation doesn't change. The city cannot, if there's a need for a repair, the city cannot collect more from Mariposa today than it would be able to if the development were to occur pursuant to the replat. So there, at this point in time, would not be a change. It would have to be the city saying, we want, the City Commission saying, we want that 0.1% modified under the agreement. So that is what prompted the language of that condition when we referred to it being reviewed and evaluated by the City Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I might have a follow-up question, probably for the engineer. On the runoff coefficient that he's talking about, and when you calculated, you were calculating the entire Phase 3 area, right?
Correct.
Where some of it is not going to go to that Mariposa Pond? Isn't that what I understand?
So, yes, some of it will not go to the Mariposa Pond. The way I, began with the original study that the original designer of the entire Grand Prairie addition, based on the way they did it, they kind of did it in all of the area that will become R1 will go from ag to housing. They provided storage for that excess runoff. So even though some of this was going into other basins, they were providing the storage there. So the storage was actually impounding more water than would normally be required if at all. If they'd split it off into other basins, they have actually provided more, making up for the storage in this basin because it was convenient to put one pond instead of multiple ponds, so they accounted for all of it being in this one pond.
It seems like there is a safety factor, if you will, that your calculations are calculating as if all of it were going to the pond, and it's not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So there's probably, yes, there's more storage there than what is necessary for what's actually draining to that pond. So there's definitely they were very conservative in their numbers.
That's the way it looked. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I guess I will too. So this one's going to be related to the emergency access road. So I guess my question on this one is, who's responsible for the maintenance or the upkeep of that emergency access road once it's been put in?
I'm pausing because I think one of the things that we've been talking about in analyzing other subdivisions within the community with one access road or an emergency access road like this is, I think, recognizing that in several of those, agreements have been done and it has or has not been addressed in those. I think I'm going to look to Greg on maybe the suggested way we would do that would probably be in the agreement that the city commission needs to address the road. I know that's one of the things that staff has on their mind is writing in conditions for maintenance, and that would be the appropriate time to do it. It doesn't solve your question at the moment, but I think one of the things that we need to look at from a plating perspective is, with these emergency access roads, is probably defining more when we put those maintenance requirements in.
And that was part of my question, because based on the current one that we had, the new one with the Geo Pavers, and then it looks like we're going to go to asphalt for once we get past the T-box area of it. So is that now become the golf course for maintenance of that? Does that become back to the owner? I mean, and again, it kind of relates back to, like you said, some of the other ones, existing ones that we have out there right now that may be asphalt. I mean, at some point, who's maintaining those? Because if it's like gravel and it gets overrun with grass, who's truly responsible for that?
So I think in dealing with this current situation, Greg, if you're available. Do you envision road maintenance being something that can be dealt with at that city commission level through the development agreement addressing the road?
Yes, I would think there would most likely be a staff recommendation and that being addressed as a matter of the terms of the agreement.
Okay.
Thank you. I actually have a question regarding these Geo Pavers, just from looking at them, they look pretty innovative, honestly, and I didn't know if we've gotten to the point where we know if we're going to do turf over that, or are we going to just have, because they're permeable, growing grass through them, or is that something that's still on the table, or do we know what direction we're going with those?
I'd suggest the applicant maybe come speak to that,
Okay.
as this is the product they've brought forward.
The intention is to allow grass to grow through it, and it's designed in order, it would be the same type of grass that would be growing in the fairway regardless, so you wouldn't even see that, you wouldn't even know it was there, and that picture there is a great example of what I anticipate this is going to look like.
And how wide is this going to be?
20 feet.
Okay. And I was looking at the packet and at the previous plan, and I don't know if you'd be the person to answer this question or not, but it appears to me that the new road actually goes through less field of play. And then because of its proximity to the tee box, it seems like it would be less likely to have a ball land on it, unless you're just horrendous at the tee box.
Right.
And I'm not a golfer, but it's just that perspective is what I'm seeing, but it just seems like there's a little more thought that went into this
Yeah, I
current
mean,
plan.
I think this is definitely less of an impact, and, being a golfer, if I landed in that area, I wouldn't be worried about my lie as much as I'd be embarrassed where I hit it, but that's just me.
And so the areas where we get into the rough, that becomes, we're talking gravel or asphalt or what?
Yeah, it would be an asphalt milling surface.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for you. What type of grass is going over the Geo Pavers?
We would probably get with the golf course to see, exactly what type of grass that would be, and whatever blend they use for their fairways.
Okay.
I wouldn't imagine we would.
I see a depth of 1.2 inches and another style for 2 inches, and I have a hard time believing any grass in this climate is going to be able to root in 2 inches with packed AB3 or road base underneath of it, when every grass in this region requires a minimum of 6-inch depth. So I don't know what the plans are to actually get grass to grow in the geogrid, or the geo block.
We'll probably this is kind of a preliminary plan. We will definitely rely on the experts who produce this product to give recommendations on, whether, do we need to go with a deeper block? What options we have to make sure that, is this stuff only designed for, a wetter climate? Make sure that we're producing something that's going to survive in this climate, and also, we do have irrigation, so hopefully, it shouldn't, hopefully, if there was to be any concern with that, it might be an area that has to be irrigated more often. I don't know, but we would pursue solutions to make sure we don't wind up. We definitely don't want to see a 20-foot dead spot out there when it's hottest part of this summer. So that's something we will definitely need to work through and make sure that we're not doing something that's going to affect the golf course.
Well, and it might be worth looking at maybe the engineering techniques they used in Topeka for the access road that was identified in those pictures. Actually, do you have those aerials, Dustin? This is an example of a grass emergency access road. The two pictures are provided, like I said, but we did snap some aerials of that example just to give a little bit of reference. So you'll see down here is the museum. These are the state archives. Thanks, Dustin. And from here, you've got an emergency access road that comes up through here. If you'll scroll down that picture, Dustin, I think it gets even closer in. There's one page below it, I think. Yeah. So you can see here that emergency access road is grass, comes through here and is dotted along here. They've got limestone markers identifying where that's at, but that is a grass emergency access road. So maybe the engineering techniques there may be applicable in this situation in order to ensure we keep the fairway green.
Okay, and about those markings, what's the plan in place for markings during the day and at night? I assume that's going to have to be lit during the night somehow.
Well, we've got several options. I think we could, we've got reflective, we've got options such as, reflective delineators along the edge. I think that would probably be a good, easy option. We've also got the possibility of putting bollards. I don't know if that would be desirable or not, but they would all have a reflective, some kind of reflective tape on there that would delineate fairly well where this thing would be.
I believe the fire marshal identified some recommendations in his letter as well, in reviewing this new easement, that bollards definitely to identify the beginning portions that run across the golf course, and to be able to keep that visible, especially those areas that are grass. It's a little bit more visible when you get onto the asphalt, but bollards were identified as a mechanism.
Okay, and just confirming, these are a polymer product or something plastic-based, I'm guessing? Okay, so we're not looking at like metal grade. So I think there was some, I heard somewhere some people were concerned there was going to be basically a metal construct that they were worried about, I think, tearing up their clubs and things like that. So hopefully that puts some minds at ease, but it being a polymer-based product.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions?
I guess I would for the fire marshal if they're available.
Thank you.
Read the letter, so you have no concerns about driving the first responder vehicle or the vehicle that would be most likely going into that area over that type of material with the grass?
No, and as I said in my memo, is just that we would want to identify the start of it. And you see this design comes up with, it's a very straight shot. Once we get over the fairway, you're going to be able to see the asphalt millings. And then bollards at the end on the other side of out of the play field, so that we can see that as a straight shot.
Okay. So do you have a concern in the evenings, because one of the questions was, is it going to be lighted, reflective at night? So would you have a concern in the evenings, you get through the grass part of it to the asphalt, being able to see that with reflective markers or non-reflective markers?
No.
Okay.
No.
I mean, no different than driving on a normal street?
No.
Okay.
And like I said previously, if you keep in mind that this is a 20-foot wide road, and our fire trucks are basically 8 foot wide, so.
A lot of margin of error there. Actually, I have a follow-up question, because and maybe things have changed. Forever ago, I was a first responder on the law enforcement side, and in my 6-7 years of law enforcement, I don't remember ever going to a fire call where, in any subdivision, whether it's when I worked in Kansas City area or here, where the response was required via the fire road. Does that scenario play out quite a bit, or?
I've been in the fire service for 23 years, and I've never responded using an emergency access road. They're for worst case scenario.
Okay.
And the administrative staff over there have spent a lot of time working with the line staff, talking about that very situation, and it's just not a situation that we see playing out, especially with the access into this development. And we have worse ones in town that come to mind, that we say it'd be more challenging than this, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I see the applicant is present. If you'd like to come up and address any questions that come up.
Bill Shepard, 430 Greystone. I'm the developer, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
ask your question regarding the funding for the, I guess we're
For the
still
access
kind
road?
of,
No, I think that still goes back to city staff on the access road on truly who's responsible for it.
Yes.
I mean, I guess part of it is it's a requirement from our fire through the international code, but the question is, at least on this situation, since it's going to be asphalt on that golf course, does it come back to city for maintenance? He's been granted an easement, but it sounds like we don't really have an answer at this point in time.
In my opinion, that would be handled in the development agreement, so.
Okay.
could that potentially be something that would be handled via special assessments or, I mean,
It could be something similar to what we did even with Mariposa Pond, or even with our drainage or our retention ponds within the development where we paid the city a one-time maintenance fee based on a 20-year maintenance cycle, and I could see something like that happening.
Well, we might even be able to address it when the easement goes forward to the city commission. Because that easement is through the golf course, I think it will be imperative to recognize who is maintaining that part that's in the fairway, and is that city golf course staff, using the right chemicals, the right materials, those types of things, and getting some of that sorted out. So that's also something we could address at that time, since the city commission does handle the final approval of the easement.
all right, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Any other questions or?
Yeah, is there somebody from the golf course that can answer some general questions?
Mike Hargrave, the General Manager of the Municipal Golf Course.
Good afternoon. I just had a couple of questions. I just wanted to know, I saw in your, I believe your letter that you didn't think it would affect the golfers at all.
Essentially, this access road would be no different than any of our other cart paths on the golf course. As far as it impacting pace of play, would not slow down pace of play at all. It is in a very, I feel like it's in the best part of the golf course that it could be. I mean, it technically is in front of all the tee boxes on hole number 3. It wasn't number 7, but it was hole number 3. And it is before the fairway. So, again, if your ball is coming to rest on that, you have probably just hit a poor shot off the tee box. And we would certainly encourage golfers to drop off of that area. Again, it would fall under the same guidelines as cart path, any other cart path on the course, or an immovable obstruction, sprinkler heads, yardage signs, whatever it might be. Free relief, no penalty or anything like that. So, I mean, we still have plenty of golfers who, for whatever reason, they'll hit their golf ball off a concrete cart path. So it's like, we're like, that's probably not a real smart thing to do, but it's their choice to do that. And yes, we would encourage people to probably not try to hit off that. And in the early stages, I think it would be very obvious that you wouldn't, but after it's grown in and the grass is growing, there may be enough cushion or something that someone could actually hit a golf ball off of it. I honestly don't know. I have never seen the pavers on a golf course, but I've seen some of the pavers, and aesthetically, it will look pretty good once it's all grown in. So I don't think it's impacting the golf course as far as pace of play. The comments that I have received from golfers is they are mostly concerned because it has been suggested or insinuated just through talk or whatever that it was going to be this main thoroughfare through the golf course. Anybody can drive across it at any time they want, and it's of course not that way. And so once they understand that only emergency vehicles will have access to this, we have had no opposition to it that I have heard anyway.
Okay. I have a few issues I'd like kind of your input on here. Being said that, I don't know if you're aware of a recent survey that within 40 hours, over 1,000 golfers voted on, 94% said they disapprove. Only 6% approved of it, and that was presented.
Was this the one that was put on the website by, I think, one of our commissioners?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes. That is one big concern I have. Some of the others have brought up to my attention. You don't have any fear of any tournaments being moved to other golf courses or any tournaments
None
not wanting to
whatsoever.
golf there?
I have not heard anything from any tournament directors stating that this would push their tournament away from our golf course
Okay.
in any way at all.
And the asphalt millings, even though they are asphalt, they collect weeds and need to be sprayed. every 2 to 3 weeks, and obviously the smell is horrid. During the summer, it's 100 degrees, you can smell that 100 feet away.
True. As I understand it, we have a couple of other areas, just smaller areas, not 20 feet wide or whatever, where our superintendent has used some asphalt millings just to kind of connect one part of, like off the backside of number 9 tee box to get over to the back 9 holes or whatnot. We have spread some asphalt millings. To my knowledge, we have never had to spray those for weeds or anything.
Okay.
And it's a very thin layer. I'm not saying that that wouldn't be an issue, but it's not something that, if you had to do it once a year, maybe, and again, my superintendent, Mark Lytle, could probably speak a little more with authority on this. It's certainly not my area. The asphalt millings, at least as I understand this design, would be well away from any really play area of the golf course. Again, it's kind of difficult to describe without being standing out there on the golf course, but the areas that would have the asphalt millings would be really, you wouldn't hardly even see it. Besides teeing off on number 2, teeing off on number 8, you would see this asphalt path, but it would not impact how you, it's not going to impact play in any way whatsoever.
Okay.
And like, to your first question, nobody who holds a tournament at our golf course has come forward and said, that's going to deter us from wanting to have our event at your facility.
Okay. I kind of like to go on record on that asphalt. I have a chemical license. We spray many parking lots with that biweekly.
And I'm not saying that isn't accurate.
I'm just saying that's going to be a lot to keep up with, a lot of expense for the city. Like I say, back to the, we're 1,000, I'm still having a hard time digesting that 94% golfers.
I honestly,
I just see a huge loss of income for the city on this, and lack of interest and even wanting to golf at the golf course.
Again, I'm not fully sure. I filled a survey out myself, of course, and I'm obviously one of the 6%. The description of that was an access road, and again, it was not really well defined what that access road is. And again, anybody who has come to me, right, anybody who has come to me and asked me about it has been concerned about it being a thoroughfare, a public use road. And when they know that it is not, they don't have any issues. And again, I'll bet it's been less than a dozen people that have spoken directly to me about it. If there's anybody you know of personally or something, send them to us. We would be happy to explain the situation. Again, as far as the golf course and staff, it is not going to impact our pace of play that we have received notice of. So.
And we have not received any written comment or calls from golfers on this. So, like I said, the questions I got were received through the city manager, discussions he had with citizens, but nothing has been emailed or sent directly from golfers asking about the relationship with the access road. And I have actually not seen the survey, so it was not done through city staff.
Correct. So being said that, would it be worthwhile to do more of an official survey to find out if this would directly affect the city?
We could sure send one out and solicit comments.
Would that be more? I think it may negatively affect the city than what we're thinking.
I guess I have two thoughts. Is one, kind of the purview in which you're approving the plat and what is reasonable. I think the way the code reads is, reasonable conditions and reasonable purview for the plat. If it's your direction, we can hold a survey. I'd have to look at the means to do that and what's the best way to do that and make sure that those, get those results out and how ideally we want to reach people. I guess the question is you have the golf course staff, you have other examples from other places. If a survey is the additional information you need, then I don't know, I have to kind of think about how, if we just put it on the city's Facebook page, or if that's something that goes through the golf course and is available in their pro shop, or, I mean, maybe that's kind of where the discussion starts, of what you're hoping to learn from the golfers, besides a yes and no. I mean, is there more feedback?
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, that's what I'd like to know as well. I mean,
Wasn't that feedback based on the old path as well?
no, it was the new path.
Are you sure about that?
Had a map on it as well.
Okay, because I've kind of caught bits and pieces of, there's a particular Facebook page pertaining to this issue. There's some colorful language and some
Yeah. No,
some grammatical errors.
Yeah, this was
galore, by the way.
This was unrelated to that.
Well, I saw there's kind of a connection, I think. But where I'm going with this is, we're being presented information from qualified experts, and, I think public feedback is great. I think sometimes on social media has a tendency to definitely skew to the negative. There's a lot of hyperbole. The facts aren't always 100% on point. And I think we need to take that in consideration. And I think at the end of the day, there's people here that want to make their comments, I'm sure, about this, and we want to hear them. But I don't know how much, because I think at the end of the day, the commissioner that posted that survey, I think it was SurveyMonkey was the link, is that person here? Because that's, to me, if that was information we needed to hear from the source, so to speak, they would be here at this meeting. But if I'm out of line with that thought, please tell me.
I don't believe so, and that information at this point, as of walking into this meeting today, was not provided to me, so it hasn't been part of public record. If the Planning Commission chooses to go forward with some kind of survey or something, I definitely think one of the things we have to get down to is, what are you hoping to learn from that public feedback specifically? So if we do have to engineer questions and that information, that we're gathering what you really need to know from them.
I mean, yeah, I think it'd be, beneficial that paying citizens that use the golf course, whether they will stop using it, continue to use it, go elsewhere, we could kind of calculate if there is a loss, if they're going to continue to go there. I mean, being that, like I said, I know it's unofficial, but 1,000 votes in 40 hours from golfers, that kind of worries me a little bit. That
I'm curious, is anybody that took that survey here at this meeting? Okay. So was that 2 people? Or did I miss anybody else? Oh, okay, so 3 people total. Obviously, we'd like to hear your thoughts on it. We've obviously already heard yours, but I guess, are we ready for public comments?
yeah.
Good, or any more questions, or?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
on the survey part of it, I mean, we can take surveys forever and just keep pushing things out. I mean, when the golf course increased their cart fees and changed how all of that was, there was a big uproar on that, and everybody said nobody's going to go to municipal golf course, no longer going to use it, and it's still being used. So, I mean, there's always going to be somebody that's going to disagree with what you're going to do, and those that disagree are typically more vocal. So, I'm not in favor of taking a public survey for whether the golf course is going to be used or not. I really don't think that it's going to be an impact on whether people use it or not. If you've got grass running across an area that's got grass, and you've got asphalt running into an area which basically is a rough area.
And it's in an area that's really not likely to be in the field of play.
Right.
Unless you're just a horrendous golfer, which we've already covered. But, I mean, this thing's been hanging in the breeze for a long time. And
I mean, we were looking to do a replat, I mean, and we can continue to bring up issues, but I think we need to kind of continue with we can talk about a survey later as possibly, but let's continue with, my opinion is let's continue with comments on what we're talking about specifically on the replat part of it right now.
Did you have a comment?
I do. The part I struggle the most with is everything that has to take place that wouldn't have to otherwise, for 7.73 acres. I mean, if you're talking 700 or 70 or whatever, I mean, we're talking, and I know it's not, I obviously don't own it, and it's a different story for somebody who does, but the whole point is to do, for the city to pay, for the taxpayers to pay such a significant amount of anything, effort to go for that small of an area. I don't know, I think it's a square peg going into a round hole. I just don't think it fits. I don't get it. That's the part I struggle with. Because everything else is fine currently. Is that true? Do I understand that correctly?
So
Is
as-
everything fine?
Wait, I guess like,
With the
I want to
current.
define fine. So as in the final plat that's approved with 19 lots and the current easement for the emergency access road.
That's where I struggle, yeah.
So yes,
Phase
those,
1 and 2 are currently up to fire code as it sits.
as it sits, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just.
No.
So we're doing all of this for 7.73 acres.
And I think
In
as it
addition.
sits, what I hear is, the intention has always been that as the development completely builds out, it was the intention that the fire access road would be put in before any building permits were issued. So if you went forward with the 19 lots as finally platted at this time with that emergency access road, then yes.
Okay. And this was originally voted on, was it 2008? Was that, I mean, so we're kind of left over with, 12 years later, something that somehow didn't get resolved, and
And there's a reason for that, I think,
Well,
because
but-
it's just difficult.
I
I think
do
it's, everything's
think-
built in, I mean, it's on the outside built, and then on the inside, how do you get there from here? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we are right now. Everything's built in.
but I do think we have some lots that are gonna, these patio homes, 55 and over, I think without a doubt, there is a large demographic of people who are downsizing, traditionally probably baby boomers, that are going to be, I mean, this is probably housing that's going to be utilized. I mean, Flor del Sol is, has been a hot commodity for going on 20 years now.
Yep.
And this kind of fits into that same niche.
Between two fairways, I don't know. I see it, it's hard for
I
me.
understand your point.
I don't know.
I'm all about more development, but, I mean,
Does it
is
have
it
to
worth
be
it,
there?
I guess, is 19 houses worth the,
Well, I guess the
What we're doing.
19
19
houses have
houses were
already
already approved.
solved. Like, that plat is finalized, like,
that was under the impression there was a road already existing too.
well,
No, the access road was when that third development was put in, and the original easement for the existing platting is already in place. The only issue right now is whether they go from 19 to 30. If he stays with the existing platting, we're done. We don't have this conversation. If he changes to the 30, that's where the issue has become, but in reality, it's still the same property. It's just whether we're going from 19 to 30, there still has to be an access road, because if it went to 19, he has to have an access road, and the access road's going across the golf course. No different than it is right now. So the question truly is do we want, he wants to replat from 19 to 30, nothing else changes at this point in time, because if he stays 19, he has an access road, whether it's the new one that he puts in or it's the old one that was originally given the easement part of it. So which golf course is on either side of it, which was done originally. So all we're trying to do at this point in time is decide, do we replat to 30 lots instead of 19? The question now becomes from the public is kind of whether they disagree or disagree with it based on what they sold initially, but the question back to us is, does it fall within the guidelines of what an R1 is within the city definition? And if we get to that point of it, which is the lot width, lot depth, does it meet those requirements? Does the access road meet that requirement based on the number of homes in the development? Our fire marshal is saying yes. Our golf course superintendent is saying that it's not going to impact the golf course. So we need to move forward. I mean, my opinion is we need to move forward at this point in time on, do we want to do the replat or not?
I agree.
I didn't realize that the access road was necessary regardless.
Yes.
I mean, will helmets, I mean, how do you live between two fairways safely? I mean, I don't know if these people are going to wear helmets or what, but, I mean, if everybody is a free-for-all on the Muni golf course, you wouldn't want me playing out there because somebody better look out. But
That might be a buyer beware thing.
buyer beware. I don't know.
People
What?
love golf course views. I mean, it's
But
quantifiable. I mean.
is that normal between
Yes.
two fairways?
Well, I'm not going to say.
Perimeter, yes. Two fairways.
There, I think you could find a significant amount of examples of golf course living in the United States, whether in Kansas or another state, that have very similar situations.
I wouldn't live there.
Okay.
Commissioners, Mike Montoya, I'm appearing on behalf of the developer. I did want to make sure, and I think you touched upon it here, that if this replat is not granted, we still have to put in the access road for the 19 lots. And I think your questions are reasonable, and I think the survey that came out, I haven't had a chance to, I saw that one of the city commissioners did put that out. I don't know how many times the voters were allowed to vote. I don't know what the questions were designed for, but I do think that the survey came out, and we've kind of moved the ball a little bit. We started off initially before this commission, and the concern was fire safety, and the fact that if there would be something that would prohibit the fire department from getting into the development, then there was going to be a catastrophe, and we didn't want to face that. And that was the big issue before the city commission. It was the issue that drove the moratorium, the temporary moratorium, to address this fire access road. We've done that now, and we've sent a letter. We've made it clear that the developer is going to pay for that cost up front, that's going to be a cost that will be eventually recovered through special assessments. The issue of maintenance of the road, whether it's spraying, whether it's taking care of the road that's being put down, will be addressed in the developer's agreement. Did that with the drainage issue, paid $20,000 up front in order to cover that, and I'm assuming that as part of this developer's agreement, we'll have in there the future maintenance of this road as well. The important thing, though, is that the access road has already been approved. We already have the easement in place, and if you deny the replat, the road's still going to come in. And it really, what the developer's tried to do in this case, he's tried to address every issue that's been brought before both you and the city commission as it relates to the replat. There's been the issue of traffic. Justin Owens is here to address that issue, can describe to you how it's actually going to minimize the traffic as opposed to building the 19 single-family residences. There's been the issue of drainage that the experts have presented you with the evidence. There's been issues that relate to fire protection, and the experts have shown up and presented you with their testimony on what they believe the issues are with respect to fire protection. There's been issue with respect to the play at the golf course and how this would affect that play. The expert has shown up today and expressed their opinion to you. I think what's significant is that, and I agree, it's been a lot of work to address 7.73 acres. But what's important is that in each step along the way, we've got experts that have come to you and said, we've addressed all of these concerns. And each and every one of them have said, the developer has met those concerns. And the proponents have put forth several good arguments that they asked us to look at. It really came down last time to, we need to have that access road before anything happens to us. It wasn't an issue of slow play. It wasn't an issue of damage to the golf course. It was, we need to have that access road. And so now we've done that. And we've gone through and we've said, we're going to pay for it, we're going to put it in. We've put in our letter that you've read that's in your packet that there will not be a single building permit issued in that Phase 3 for any of these 30 lots until that access road is put in. So that should take care of all of their concerns that relates to fire protection. So now we're shifting, and we've shifted to a survey that says we don't want it on the golf course, and that's why we need to deny this replat. That's kind of what has come up as a part of this survey. And I think what we're missing here is that it's already going to go into the golf course.
It's a moot point, basically.
And the developer has tried to minimize the risk on the golf course and anything that would deal with play on the golf course by moving the location of that road. And if you look at that, it goes directly across in front of the tee boxes. And in reality, it is not going to affect play one bit. There may be some additional maintenance issues, I'll admit that. But I think we can we have issues in replats all the time. I think we can address those maintenance issues in a good developer's agreement. What we're asking you to do is just to take a look at the evidence that's before you, with all of the expert evidence that's before you, as opposed to the comments that I've talked to this person out of town and they wouldn't do that. I've talked to this person and they think it's something that should never occur. We couldn't find a single development in Wichita on a golf course that has one of these roads. So I think in this particular case, the developer's gone above and beyond to do what needs to be done to provide access for fire protection to this development. And one last thing, and I think it's important to know, we read a lot of things on social media. And the survey was an example. I saw that today. I also saw some of the other language that's on social media. And there's some folks in this room that have posted things on social media that is pretty demeaning to this developer. I don't think it's fair. I think he has done everything that's been asked of him to put this development in. He's tried to comply with everything the experts have said. So as you listen today in a quasi-judicial manner, I would just simply ask that you listen to what the evidence is and take into consideration what the experts say. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready for any members of the public to come forward and give their opinion? And I would ask everybody to please keep in mind the 5-minute limit. Thank you very much.
Chris Carlson, 1217 Bentgrass. He was just talking about experts, but the one thing that we still have not got down on paper, have no idea, is what he's really doing. By doing a replat, you have nothing on paper. We went from the PDD that we all asked, I believe you also asked, can we see some elevations? Can we see how these would sit on the course? How they would each individual? Are they going to block views? We've talked about our covenants and how it's supposed to be kind of open spaces. That's our issue. That why you would take it and close the heart of the golf course up by doing these multiple houses. He can do what he wants to do if he's really going to do it. But we don't have anything on paper that proves it's going to be 55. So is that traffic assessment, is it true? We don't know. He wouldn't do that. He went the sneaky way around and did the replat. So we have Markley down the road. I was at the commissioners meeting. They purposely put in an easement to have trees so you don't have this single row of fences and houses. Why would you want that in the middle of your golf course? I still would like to see Bill come up and prove what he's doing. I'd like to see some elevations. I'd like to see physically what's the difference of having a house on a 60-foot or, when the other gentleman was here, a compromise on an 80-foot lot or 100. What is the physical? Everything going on around Salina, you hear the city manager, the mayor on the radio talking about everything positive they're doing. The stuff downtown. They didn't just go fix downtown, they made it better because they want that nice view and that nice look. That's our biggest concern with this replat. And this one is not the little box and the little agenda that just can be stamped and go on. We all know now that we're in this weird gray area with Mariposa, the golf course, the neighbors. It is far-reaching. It's not that piece of land that a farmer sold off to the side, a developer's going to come in and do his thing. This has too many fingers, and I'm here to say, once again, please do not approve the replat. Thank you.
Thank you.
This one passes out. Do we say my name first, or?
No, go right ahead. And we.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we please have one copy for the record?
We'll get it to you.
Thanks.
Justin Hankey, 1322 Bentgrass Drive. I missed you guys, it's been a while. It's not going to be a 45-minute presentation. The original approval in 2009 was based on using the dirt maintenance path that had already been present. The commission was misled and told the path was already used by emergency vehicles. There were reinforced cart paths made for emergency vehicles. And that all areas would be playable. None of that was true. The original plan reported that grass pavers would cross whole 8 tee box and be playable. Now it's going to be a paved asphalt road across that tee box, or in front and part of it. This never would have been approved back then if they were well informed, and they wouldn't approve the current plan. Now the road is being held hostage for the replat. Examples city staff provided from other courses in town are also very misleading. They are 5-foot dirt cart paths that are away from golf play. Another one is a 10-foot dirt maintenance path that is also away from fairways and rough and has always been there. They were not added later on by a private developer. They do not cross golf holes where golf play occurs. No course anywhere would have allowed this to happen. I provided an email from Geosystems Chief Design Engineer, Mr. Wedden, and environmental scientist, Mr. Schneider, who specifically state that they don't recommend geoblock for areas where golf play occurs due to damage of clubs and possible injury to golfers if struck by a club. They are not aware of any fire lanes made of this material on golf courses anywhere where golf play occurs. However, our staff approved it. It's not innovative, it is inappropriate. These areas would need to be roped off permanent as drop zones in the middle of the #1 handicap hole, right where the majority of golfers drive. Hole 3 is the #1 handicap hole. You hit into a Kansas south wind that the majority of time is 20 to 30 miles an hour. Most guys don't reach the fairway. I carry a low handicap and I end up there sometime, and I drive around on average probably 230, 240. Average golfer is probably in the 180 yard driving distance. So they're actually more in play right now where it is being proposed. Separately, at request, I reviewed the Mariposa Cornerstone contract. The original agreement was based on Cornerstone developing 3 retention ponds, which was never completed. The largest pond was supposed to be between hole 13 and 14. Without it, it significantly affects the amount and rate at which Mariposa receives drainage. Eliminating the pond was done after the contract was signed. This is a breach of contract and affects multiple parts of the contract. Mariposa should have the right to a civil lawsuit to stop any further development and increase drainage until this is completed, given it's been over a decade since this was approved. I've also attached the documents from the retention pond approvals. From the standpoint of what you said with the survey, I was shown the survey and I took it. I do agree that it should have specified a little more clear that this was a fire emergency access and it shouldn't have been used, but all golfers I've spoken with, and I don't want to do hearsay like you said, are not happy about this. This isn't something that occurs on golf courses. Those other examples are not similar in any scenario. They are completely away from where golf play occurs. You know, speaking to Mr. Wedden that I attached on the email, when I spoke to him over the phone, he specifically stated he's a golfer and he didn't understand what I was even stating. He was saying, why would that go in that area? On hole 3, this is specifically much more in play now where it's being moved. If these are roped off areas of a drop zone, it is going to slow down pace of play, especially in a tournament with high school kids. They're going to wonder, why are we dropping out of a grass area? Why is this a drop zone? But we're going to have to, if they're worried that they can get injured, we're going to have it be a drop zone. I don't know how that would function otherwise. Appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a follow-up question for Dr. Hankey? And then could I see that map of the tee box? Because I am not understanding.
They cut out the actual white and blue tees. I'll point them out for you if you want, if we can go back. So north, I guess, I don't know if you guys can scan on that picture as opposed to having to go to the
Right, the blue would be further north, right?
So you're hitting from north to south. It's a long par 5. Hold on, let's go to the picture.
Dr. Hankey, do you want to?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So on the picture you saw, you were seeing this tee box, which is the women's red tees and then I think the women's yellow tees. The actual tee box is right here. So this distance is about, I'm going to say 180 yards, give or take. 150 to 180 would be my guess. that's where it's going to be. You're always hitting into a south wind, or a wind coming from the south. In Kansas, it's always 20, 30 miles an hour. That's why this hole is hard. Most guys don't reach the fairway. Mr. Gary's here, who's a little older. I bet you that's probably his normal area. Sorry. And anybody who's...
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So if you're looking at these tee boxes, but even to reach the fairway where the big tree is a good spot to be for a good golfer. I know your husband's a golfer. He's one of the longer hitters in town. He probably on average outdrives me by 20 yards. When it's windy, this is tough. And if you get under the ball, you're going to end up here. And if that's where our drop zone is going to be, it's going to affect pace of play. And if we're worried about golfers getting injured, as the two experts from Geo System said, that's going to affect pace of play. It's also going to be extremely unsightly to see a asphalt millings road go right over the tee box. The forward tee box, it's not the white and blues that are right here on 8, sorry, to jump holes. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Oh,
Yeah, thank you. My name is John Blanchard. I live at 250 South 9th Street. First of all, I just want to check, the person that probably can answer most of these questions is not here, Mr. Andrew. Did you happen to prepare the staff report that we were looking at here now? Because my comments are somewhat based on the staff report.
I think I can answer those.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. It has been over 10 years. I think the reason why we're here is a policy called yes, somehow. Okay? As part of the staff report that I'd like to point to is one thing is that as part of your staff report, I think it's page 3, you had a thing in here under the heading of Planning Commission Review and Consideration, and you kind of make it sound to planning commissioners that unless the approval of a plat is, it says here directly, approval of a plat is improperly denied when the plat conforms to all zoning and subdivision regulations and planning commission standards. Did the original plat conform to all subdivision standards of the subdivision ordinance, or were there variances required?
There were variances required.
Okay, so a replat is a replat, so the replat has at least 2 items that would require a variance as well, correct?
I guess I would like you to be more specific if possible. What?
Okay, cul-de-sac length and minimum distance between, on tangents between curves. Both require a variance. The court case here that was, it looks like this is meant to make you folks think that you have very little decision-making ability in this case. You have every right to make requirements and deny a replat based on the fact that you don't have to issue a variance. Not a single one on this. If you don't issue a variance, it goes, they still have their 19 lots on their plat, and they still have their access road. You don't have to, it's not a foregone conclusion, and even though I think the full weight of the city manager, city attorney, and planning department is on your back right now, there's a reason why it takes 4 votes of the city commission to overturn your recommendations here. It's because you are granted authority. You have the authority. You work for the citizens as appointed officials. You don't work for the city staff. So, in fact, if you go back and look at the Rod Rock Enterprises case in Overland Park, their planning commission went against the recommendations of their planning staff, went against their recommendations of the city attorney, denied a request for action, and the courts upheld it, and the appeals court upheld that. So you have discretion and you have authority here. I want to go to why the variances are important. One of the things that you can make a variance, but the variances cannot be made to overcome an economic hardship on the part of the developer. Okay, there is a reason why he wants to divide this into smaller lots and not keep the 19 lots he has. It's because the market for $450,000 to $600,000 homes is oversaturated in Salina, and he's likely to sit on a whole bunch of lots here unless he can get replatted into smaller lots. That was a business decision that he made. The people that own homes in that neighborhood made their life choice as a place to live based on the fact that this wasn't going to be a bunch of villas on this golf course. It was going to be all large custom homes, and that's the development that they bought into, and that is the development that is the highest and best use based on the prior planning commission saying that that's what we're going to plat it as. And to do otherwise, to change it now to create more density and senior housing, so to speak, would be bringing a nuisance onto them and creating an adverse effect on their property values. As far as land use and your role as a planning commission, I want to speak just a little bit about age-assisted and age-limited housing. What they're talking about, traffic numbers and everything, is a little misleading, in my opinion, because they say that it's the intent of the developer to market it as a certain type of senior-assisted housing. What they don't do is a number of things. There's no enforcement mechanism in here. There's no way to say that if you're over 55 or under 55, you can't live here. Those should be in the CCNRs, the protective covenants of that. I didn't see in the 10 conditions that you made here that there was any enforcement mechanism for age-restricted housing. Did I miss something?
No, you did not.
Okay.
It's not a recommendation
Okay.
at this time, but it's up to this body to make that recommendation.
Is that within our scope of power to actually enforce covenants and HOA rules, though? I mean, it seems like it's out of our wheelhouse.
I think there's two things there. One, enforcing covenants is one thing. If part of this discussion was that, because remember, I'd just like to point out that these are recommended conditions. It's always up to you, the body, to decide which of these recommendations you take and to add those that you see fit. If you were to make a recommendation specifically based on age, I would probably reach out to the city's legal counsel to verify that that is something that we can condition, because I would imagine it's hard to enforce, but I think it's worth asking that question if that's something you're concerned about.
My point being, Chairman, is that there is nothing saying here that the first person that comes up to buy one of those lots, if it's a married couple with 3 young children, can't buy that home. Okay, there's nothing in there, which automatically means that traffic analysis and that whole spiel in there about, oh, it's going to be less impact, is null and void. It's an unsafe situation to begin with, and
How is it unsafe, just out of curiosity?
well, it's already requiring a substantial fire code.
But regardless of the replat or not, the fire road's required for this
Right,
phase
the fire
3.
code is required,
So
but
my question to
the
you
more residences and the more building structures and the
How
more...
is that a safety issue, is what I'm asking.
Well, I'm not here to argue with you, but...
I'm asking a question.
How is, it should be obvious. If you have
Enlighten
more
me.
homes on a longer street, each one of those homes has an individual kitchen, has individual heat and air conditioning systems. There's more opportunities for those types of fires and so on. I don't think you minimize risk by adding more homes. I think you multiply risk by adding more homes. That's my point here. The other thing is that in your discretion as a planning commission, if we really want to look at age-restricted and over 55 housing, I think the main goal on that is probably to allow people to age in place, if I'm correct. If I'm incorrect, you can let me know. I mean, that's the purpose of age-restricted housing.
I think
over
there's
55
multiple facets
housing.
to that issue, because a lot of people, when they retire, downsize in square footage and lawn maintenance.
Okay.
And so I guess where I'm having a little bit of a problem is when we talk about, let's say hypothetically, these are going to be, everything plays out the way it's supposed to, where it's 55 and older. We have, that age group is an eyesore. We have the age group is this, I'm kind of paraphrasing basically what you're bringing to the table here, which is it's going to bring down the value.
Please don't paraphrase,
You
please.
said this would bring down the value of the subdivision.
Right, because the home values
So,
the lots are smaller and the home
We have a
values.
group of 55 and older, and you've classified them in a manner that if I were in an age group, I'd find mildly offensive, is
Okay,
my point.
I'm not sure what I said that you
Okay,
interpreted.
You
but
said that it would devalue
it
the
would.
area.
You know, let me try to educate you. These people own $400,000 and $500,000 homes. If you put $200,000 homes in these neighborhoods, when people go to sell them and they try to sell their house, the real estate appraiser is going to come and look for comparables in your neighborhood. Okay, what do you think is going to happen to their home values? They're going to go down. I didn't talk about aesthetics, I didn't talk about the quality of the housing, and I certainly didn't insult older people. I don't know what you're sitting here listening to, but that's not what I said. Let me carry on. When you're looking at age-restricted housing and aging in place, what you want to look for is older people to age in place. They want to be in close proximity to services, stores, doctors, all that. Most of that is within walking distance, okay? At the very least, they need to be within walking distance to public transportation. This is in the middle of the golf course. It's completely inappropriate for senior housing, okay? And it's also inappropriate because the folks that have invested in that neighborhood look to you to, when it says health and welfare, welfare means they need to have their property's values protected. Health is obviously, let's don't create situations where we need to have variances and so on. And Mr. Lankwitz, have you ever heard of the Milgram experiment?
I can't say I have, no.
Okay, it was a study done in 1965, and what made me think about it was when you made the comment before about, oh, hey, we've had a lot of experts come in here and tell us that, oh, all these things, they've conformed to everything, and we need to listen to the experts. Well, the Milgram experiment was done in 1961 by a Yale professor, and it dealt with how people deal with authority figures, and that oftentimes people will react in the way that the authority figure wants them to react, even though they didn't know that it's morally incorrect or just against their own personal belief systems, but they'll do it anyway. So I would ask you that, as I started out, I said, yes, somehow was the policy. That sometimes can work, but when the somehow is that you have to make conditions that you would not normally make, you have to make excuses that you would not normally have to make, and you have to do things that you now set a precedent for, and the next time somebody comes in and wants a 4,000-foot long cul-de-sac and they want to put high-density housing at the very end of the cul-de-sac, you're really going to have no grounds to say no. You guys are stuck in a situation where the Planning Commission 10 years ago should have said no, but they didn't. The developer's stuck in a situation where the City Commission has approved special assessment financing for more subdivisions with their price point of homes than the market will bear, and so now he wants to replat to smaller lots. I say, please look out for the future planning commissions of this community. Don't set the precedent. Your number one job is do no harm, but please protect their investments. Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
May I ask a question of, Mona, as your realtor agent? I just want to confirm I understand comparables. I thought that you take a house, and if these $400,000 and $500,000 houses have, let's say, 6 bedrooms, but these others have 3, that you just look at other homes with 6 bedrooms. You don't look at the 3-bedroom home.
It's just more than that. I mean, they're just, bed and bath, sure, it's part of the equation, but certainly not all.
So you're saying those smaller homes could bring down the price of a home just by being in the neighborhood? Is that what I hear?
I'm not even going to go there. I'm
Okay.
not. No. I
Maybe I
wouldn't-
should have asked
wouldn't
Mr.
Actually, I think we need to get Mr.
Yes.
Shepherd up here because.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I think we need some clarity on some issues because Mr. Blanchard mentioned they were going to be $200,000. My recollection per the previous meetings is they were substantially more than that.
350 and up. I don't know where you could build a $200,000 house. I'd like to see him do it. I'm sure he knows everything, so he probably knows that too. So
I just, we're,
And what's the minimum square footage to reach that amount?
They're in the covenants of 1,600 square feet minimum.
To sell a $350,000 house? Because when I look, there is not one in this town that comes close to that.
could you please come up to the microphone? You're okay, it's just, it's a formality that we need. and-
Chris Carlson, no, because this is what I was trying to say earlier. I built that house. I'm that person. I'm the low guy in the neighborhood. So if you look at all the houses, and I'm sorry, I've had the flu for the last couple
No,
of
you're
days.
fine,
so
but if you wouldn't mind, thank
I
you so
wasn't
much.
able to get this stuff printed out for you, which were slab patio homes that have been sold in Salina and the values. And basically, you're looking at, to hit this 300 or 350,000, they have to be a minimum of 2,000 square foot plus. Am I wrong?
Don't look at me. I'm
Okay,
not.
but I'm saying, it's,
Yeah.
if you get on Zillow, I wish I would have, I'm sorry that I had the flu, I wish I would have had this to
Are you
present.
looking at new construction? Are you looking at?
I am looking at new
Okay.
construction, two of them, right when you go into Magnolia, there's a couple there. I have my own that's been within recent, and then you, around town, there's smaller ones.
It's been my experience, and I've had a few different types of homes. The entry-level point, and I could be wrong on this situation, I mean, every development varies, but if a developer or a realtor says, hey, this neighborhood starts at 250, well, it's my luck I end up in the one that's 325 or 350. And my guess is by the time you appoint these patio homes with the luxury kitchens that everybody seems to need, and I use that kind of loosely, in these homes, and you start getting the higher end fixtures, I mean, you're probably talking close to a $400,000+ home.
You need to have at least 2,000 square foot on your home to reach over the $300,000 mark, including those things.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But we also need to keep in mind that building costs do fluctuate.
Yeah.
The location, in my opinion, and it's a compliment to your neighborhood, it's a primo location. It's going to bring top dollar per square foot. That's just my observation as somebody who does look at the real estate market. I'm not a realtor, but I am a real estate investor. And unfortunately, I bought my share homes over the years since I've been back in town. And there's a lot of variables that some are easy to quantify, some are not. But I think if you have this mindset that they're going to be the bare minimum 350, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how many upgrades people will do, especially when they're getting a golf course view. But that's, I'm thinking of myself as a buyer. I personally know 3 people in that age group that have expressed interest. Actually, they're members of my family. And the type of choices they make, they're probably going to be $400,000 to $450,000 if they were to make that purchase. So
Again, I go back to when we were at the PDD. If this is really what the heart of all of this really is, that the guarantee of the 55, the guarantee of this value is equal to that full, it's not just our neighborhood, all the ones around us are that way.
I understand. How do you feel about Flora del Sol as a development? Because to me, it's kind of in that same ballpark.
Yes, it's very nice looking, it's very well kept. There again, it's all stucco. It's got trees all the way around it, so when you're on the court, you don't even really see it. So you don't even think of. Then you look up the hill off of where the little mini course is, and those little townhomes, and they're scrunched, there's no views. It's that type of, I don't even know what that's
Help me out with location on that
called.
one, because I'm trying to place.
Where you have to go behind the apartments.
Is that the Fairdale?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and those were
Yeah.
built in the 80s, I think?
Yeah. They're all on top of each other, and there's not, it's just a complete different than like Florida Soul and that.
No, I understand your concern. If that's what was going in your neighborhood, I would be gravely concerned.
And that's what we go back to, was why did he run away from the PDD? And we all feel like he went this sneaky route for you guys just to hurry up and approve a plat. If he truly believes that, and he's truly going to put his money where his mouth is, why don't we all have proof? I mean, like I said, I even go back, I think it was Joshua that at one point said, can we just see an elevation? Because if you're building 2,000 square foot home, minimum, like I said, go look at it yourself and see if I'm wrong, on a 60-foot lot, how does that sit? Does it even fit? Is there even a need to shrink these lots? And I've never heard Bill come up here and really lay everything out here, here, here. We've all been doing homework, we've all been doing all this stuff, but the one person this surrounds has done nothing for any of that to assure us. So I don't know how you can make an intelligent decision without some assurance. That's really where the whole neighborhood is standing. It's like, just leave well enough alone and go do what he says he's gonna do. We don't have any qualms about that. We just don't think he needs to shrink the lots, because that's what we feel that's going to end up happening, because we don't have any proof otherwise.
Okay.
That they're not going to come in and be these little mini ones that's on the north side. We don't have proof that it's going to be like Florida Soul and they're going to be all brick or stucco, and who knows? You approve this, he can walk away and do what he wants to do. We
So
just
Neil-
want to see some assurances.
You'll pardon me for I keep asking questions, but I just want clarity
You're-
on some issues. So in a perfect world, if things go exactly the way you'd like to see them go, how would you see this play out, this situation?
At least step back and at least go through the process of the PDD where he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Okay.
Because we have, from the very first, I don't know, when we were first going, there was a lot of concerns from different neighbors about things being so wishy-washy with him.
So you're not opposed to development in that area in general, it's just the replat of the smaller lots? So I just wanted to
Yes.
be clear on that issue. Okay.
Yes.
And is that kind of the consensus of everybody else in the neighborhood? And I
That's all we've been saying
Yeah.
from day
And
one.
I
okay,
mean,
well, then that's kind of
honestly-
why you're here, and we want to hear what you have to say.
And honestly, with Chuck and I, the very first time we met with Dean, one of the things that Dean said to us was, you know, this may end up being a regret from Mr. Shepherd for not planning this sooner, because the normal of this type of housing is to the outer side of an area, not deep in the middle of it. I mean, he even recognized that from the very beginning. And if you look on, I think it's on page 133 of your agenda, is that original whole deal map. And there's townhomes there, but where they're at, they're on that Cedar Ridge Drive. They're not stuck in the middle. But that is our bottom line. Anyway, sorry to
Okay.
jump back up.
No, we're happy to hear your opinion.
And for me to clear, I wasn't trying to be difficult.
No,
I'm just
no,
no
you're
longer in
fine.
real estate, and I thought, I can't speak to
Oh,
it
yeah. No,
because
that's
that's
fine.
not right. So-
But if you do, you can pull up Zillow. You can go over, Piercy and Dunn have built some. They're like 1,700 square foot, 1,800 square foot, and they're selling for $250, $260.
And I understand what
And
you're
they do
saying
have
there.
some upgrades. I looked at them, I shopped.
But I
I'm the
do
new
think
guy in town.
You're in a roundabout way comparing, and I'll preface this with, I used to live in Magnolia Hills.
Yeah.
But I think if you're comparing your neighborhood with Magnolia Hills, the car analogy I would use is maybe a mid-level Mercedes versus an S-Class Mercedes. They're still very nice things, but they're different products
Yeah.
and different price points. And pardon me, I'm a car guy, but I
But
don't know if that's a fair comparable.
I know the value of my home. The only reason why I passed that 300 mark is because of all the upgrades we did. I mean, my contractor consistently, why would you do that? Why would you do that? Even the lawn guy. I mean, I fought with him over that. I mean, but that is something. So I'm just saying that I've had personal on-hand experience building that home, and that's really where you are, square footage wise.
Okay.
So I'd like to see what a 2,000-plus square foot home looks like on a 60-foot lot. All shoved up together, and then as you're coming down the hill, there's going to have to be retention walls. So that's another consideration on these small lots. I don't know. Anyway, I'll
Understand.
quit yakking at you.
Well, thanks for your time, and I appreciate you fielding all those questions from me, so
Oh, yeah. not a
thank you.
problem.
Anyone else from the public?
Thank you, Greg Binkson, legal counsel for the city. I wanted to be sure that the more important folks had an opportunity to speak, so that's what I was waiting for. A couple of points raised by Mr. Blanchard. I don't know if I should start with the one to acknowledge the legitimacy of the point or to express my disagreement on another point, but there's a little both. The language in your staff report relating to the standard of what you were asked to do, I provided that language, and the effort, I mean, it's the quotes, everything you see in that indented space is directly from the case that is referenced there. I tried to, and if you all would like to see the whole case, then we can certainly make that available, but in suggesting that language, I was attempting to strike the balance between what is your responsibility relative to the zoning and subdivision regulations, but also include the language where the court spoke to reasonableness being the standard, and that there is a presumption that you acted reasonably. So the intent was not to try to box you in or suggest anything other than what the Kansas Appellate Court said. So if I missed that balance, that's on me. But the objective was to strike that balance so you had that directly from the appellate court case. And on that line, suggestion was made that there was bias on my part in favor of the applicant. If anyone, or if there could be any bias suggested on my part, it might very well have to do with the many friends, acquaintances, folks who I have known for years growing up in Salina and raising 4 children in Salina, that if I've got a bias, the thing I'm having to fight the bias against, I don't think it's a conflict, but the thing I have to be conscious of is that I do my job, and that is be absolutely as objective as humanly possible, despite those friends, acquaintances, and the relationships that we all have living in a community the size of Salina. So just wanted to make sure that, at least from my standpoint, I had the opportunity to make it clear that there is certainly not any bias in favor of the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments or questions or?
Looks like another one.
Okay.
Go on. I'm sorry. Greg Binkson again. I got wrapped up enough in that I forgot the other point that would acknowledge Mr. Blanchard's point. And I've not had an opportunity to talk. It has to do with the variations that were addressed previously and their status currently. And I have to admit that I cannot speak on a fully informed basis. I'm aware of the variations, but I, as I stand here, can't recite them to you, and I don't have the material that refers to those variations, and the extent to which the replat affects those. and the status of those variations if you were to enact or adopt the replat. And I'm not sure how to address that best. I don't know if a quick break would be appropriate, but I do have to acknowledge Mr. Blanchard's point in relation to the status of the variations in the context of the replat, if I understood your point correct.
How much time would you need?
Well, don't want to take too long, but I would think, I'm looking to Ms. Driscoll. 10 or 15 is what I had in mind, but.
Is everybody okay with that? So let's take a 15-minute recess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Reconvene. You got to go ahead. Does Mr. Bingston want to?
Actually, I'll start.
Okay, perfect.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, after brief discussion, just as a kind of reminder, I picked up this case after staff had recused themselves, and I'm a little newer to Salina, but in having this discussion, it would be my recommendation. Is it on? Can you hear me now? Okay. Being newer to Salina and having picked this case up after staff recused themselves, it would be my recommendation we address the variations. I think for clarity's sake, and there are good reasons, I've got material here that we can discuss those. This really is a topography issue, which is usually the purpose of variations, and would be happy to go through that. Mr. Bankston is here to discuss that, but I think it's my recommendation would be by taking on the replat, you're kind of looking at the whole thing fresh. That's why we can make additional conditions of approval and taking on those issues, that it would make sense to acknowledge those variations at this point and talk about why those are. So if it's okay with you, I could address what those variations are from the original plat, if it's okay.
Please.
So, as part of the application, the applicant requested 2 variances from the city subdivision regulations. One was a variance to the maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac street. And second was a variance to the requirement for a 150-foot tangent between street curves. The length of the proposed dead-end street in the peninsula is over 2,300 feet and is 2,650 feet from the entrance of the subdivision if the length of the parkway is included. Section 36-10 of Salina Code states that the Planning Commission finds that particular hardships and particular difficulties may result from strict compliance with subdivision regulations. It may approve variations of exceptions to these regulations so that substantial justice may be done and public interest served. This section also states that the Planning Commission shall not approve variations unless they make findings based on the evidence presented in each specific case that, 1, granting the variation will not be detrimental to public safety, health, or welfare, or injurious to other property or improvements in the neighborhood in which the property is located. 2, the conditions upon which the request for a variation is based are unique to the property for which the variation is sought and are not applicable generally to other property. Because of this particular physical surroundings, 3, because of the particular physical surroundings, shape or topographical conditions of this property involved, an extraordinary hardship to the owner would result as distinguished from mere inconvenience in the strict letter of this chapter is carried out. Finally, 4, the variation will not in any manner vary the provisions of the zoning regulations, ordinance, or comprehensive plan, official street classification plan, or other major street plan or official map of the city. The 2 conditions that make this property unique are its relatively landlocked location and the shape and topography of the site. The property is bordered on the west by platted lots and on the north and east by the Salina Municipal Golf Course. That leaves only Cedar Ridge Drive frontage as potential street access to the site and the choices of access points is limited by the hills and curves on the street which affect sightlines. So with a total length of its property of 2,600 feet from north to south, the golf course to the north and east, and the natural slope of the drop-offs, the developer is very limited as to how they can lay out the lots and streets within the developed portion of the 37-acre tract. To mitigate concerns about having a second lane through development for the emergency vehicles, Cedar Ridge entrance is blocked. The applicant proposed working with the golf course to construct a secondary emergency access road from Markley Road to the northern cul-de-sac, and the rest of the staff report leads on. But that touches on where those variances are, why they were made, and talks to what you need to consider as to what makes those variations appropriate. So again, the two variances are from maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac street and to a variance to the requirements for a 150-foot tangent between street curves.
Thank you. Would Mr. Bengtson like to come up and address what we, or is that? I mean, I guess, does there need to be any more clarification on that, or does that pretty much cover it?
Well, I think they would need to make a motion to accept those variances or make those variations.
That's the concern, is to be sure that as you look at the replat, you, similarly as occurred in the original plat, are recognizing that this configuration, as I understand it, does affect the replatted area as well. And as a result, it would be necessary to reaffirm those if you all believe you can make the requisite findings. It is certainly something, again, in your discretionary realm as you consider the test as to whether those variations are appropriate in this case. And and have to acknowledge Mr. Blanchard's input. Frankly, there were a lot of things going on in this case, but the need to reaffirm those variations simply did not occur to me until he mentioned that. So I regret that and I apologize for that. But
I guess,
we can address them as you all see fit.
and from a fairness for the applicant and for the body, I guess I want to say to the body, you don't have to feel pressured to do this right now. I know this is kind of been sprung on you and it wasn't in the packet. We are here to support you if you choose to go forward tonight and would like to try and make these findings here and now, but also if you give staff direction that you would like to deal with this at a future meeting or feel necessary to postpone this issue, we of course completely understand and would be prepared to address this issue at a future meeting. But I don't want this to be an and/or. We're prepared to handle either direction you get.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
I guess just clarify again what the variances are again for me.
Yeah, you have two of them. It's a variation from the maximum length of the dead-end cul-de-sac. So basically, from tip to top, the subdivision has that extremely long piece with that peninsula. And so a variation has to be given to have that extended length for a street that's dead-ending with a cul-de-sac.
So what is the minimum length before you have the variance then?
So I believe the maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac via the subdivision code is 600 feet.
And we're at what?
Much longer. It's the length of the proposed dead-end street to the peninsula is over 2,300 feet, and is 2,650 feet from entrance of the subdivision to the length of the parkway, all the way to the end.
Okay, and then the other one was what?
Is a variation for the requirements for a 150-foot tangent between all street curves. That again has to do with that layout of having that kind of peninsula piece and working between the golf course components essentially.
Okay.
And this subdivision as a whole, Grand Prairie, I mean, if you remember back to when it was originally platted, several variations had to be given just to be able to deal with the hills and the topography of the area. So it is a unique kind of geographical area.
Do you happen to know the reason 600 feet is a max?
I would not, I think, off the top of my head, but I think Dan Stacks with city engineering might still be here.
Don't see
He's
him.
gone.
We can't hear you. I'm sorry. It's kind of out of my control because I don't have the on-off button. It's your green light on it. Now is it working? Yep.
Yes, there you go.
I promise I didn't touch it. Okay, but now. You got it cranked up. So from what can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. From what I understand, I would kind of defer some of that to engineering, just because I'm kind of talking a little off the cuff too, and a lot of this happened when I wasn't here, so I'm just pulling this directly from the staff report. This is actually if anyone is referencing or wondering what I'm referencing, these are the staff report from the December 17th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting that has that timeline of identified issues in it. So it's coming directly from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike Montoya again. I just wanted to point out on the variations, without the replat, the variations are in place. So they're exactly going to be the same variations whether you grant the replat or not. So you're not it's kind of like the access road where if you don't approve the replat, they're still going to put in the access road. And the variations would be exactly the same as what they are now. So I just wanted to point that out. Yep.
Well, I got you up there. Do you have, or I apologize, you've probably gone through this, being that my first day here. Do you have any information on the houses they're talking about that would be smaller in the covenants? Are these house sizes still within the range of the initial covenants that were given to the homeowners?
They're the same covenants, same size as what's in the covenants now, as what the owners have now. Same covenants will apply to these homes as they do there.
Okay. Even after the lot split?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So should we at least get that vote out of the way?
Mr. Chair, I did see that Dan Stack, city engineer, is here,
perfect.
so maybe Dan might want to speak a little bit to the subdivision. Dan?
Turn the corner, and he's still there.
I still see him.
Yeah.
Mr. Hers is talking to him.
Okay. If you want to, maybe we can kind of continue. I think they're conferring on something, but hopefully Dan can get into speaking a little bit to those. Oh, here he is. Sorry.
Dan Stacks, engineer. Wasn't prepared for this one.
Sorry, me neither.
Those are subdivision regulations that have been around how long?
A while.
Quite a while, so I just cannot speak to why 600 feet other than connectivity. I mean, it is a connectivity thing with a lot of cities that try to connect, not to have too long of subdivisions, but I lived in Overland Park for 10 years and it was the glorious place of subdivision cul-de-sacs. That's what everybody wanted, so I just don't remember 600 feet, and I'll have to look into that further because I'm just not sure.
Dan, I was going to say, can you speak a little bit to the 150 tangent between curves and maybe why that is ideal in this situation or needed?
I think it's just for sight distance, typically for going around. If you're going to have a curved road, you have to have enough room to go at a certain rate of speed, in this case 30 miles an hour, to design for a vehicle to go 30 miles an hour and still go at the right I guess, go at that speed as well and see. That's just the safe, that's typically how the curves are designed. You have larger horizontal curves on a highway, and you have smaller horizontal curves on a residential street. So that's how that would come to play here.
Okay.
I think that answer, I was wondering if there's any safety reason, which I don't see for the 600 feet. And then, like Mr. Montoya said, if it was approved for the other plat, then I'm guessing safety-wise, there's not a reason not to approve it.
Yeah, just definitely the fire access road has come up, and so it depends on how long the city and the codes allow before you have to have another entrance, and that's definitely something that's been discussed a lot. And in this case, they have provisions for the fire access road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any further thoughts pertaining to whether to vote on the variance or continuation of this, which I said before, this has been floating in the breeze for quite a while, and it'd be nice to get some clarity on it.
Yeah, I think on the variance part of it, it's, even with the replat, it's going to be the same as what it was before, so I don't see an issue with it based on the emergency access road with it, because if the replat's not approved and it's 19, it's still going to be the same thing. If the replat is approved, then we still have the same variances, and I don't see that it affects it overall
I see it as
on the
more
variance part of it.
confirmation.
So I don't know, do we need to make a motion on anything, or how do we need to move forward on that?
Yes. I think we could probably work that into the motion for when you're ready to make conditions on the plat. So maybe discussion regarding conditions of approval for the plat. And then I can work on drafting up some language on how to make a motion to approve the variations, if that would work.
So I guess my only other question would be going back to the developer on the staff recommendation, whether he has seen those, he has any comments on any of the specific recommendations that were made by staff?
Yeah, the applicant did get the packet at the same time that it was made available to everyone, so I think their approach or opinion about those conditions would probably need to come directly from them.
Bill Shepherd, at this time, we don't have any issues with the conditions.
Would you have an issue if we added 55 and older?
You added what?
55 and older condition?
Well, I think that'll be covered in I don't know how that's covered, and I probably need to consult with council on that, so.
And we were going to confirm with Mr. Bankston whether we could even add that.
That's fine, okay.
I don't want to speak for Mr. Montoya, but we matched notes quickly. I would not know the means by which the city or you all through the platting process could impose that type of a condition. I think I can't claim to be a real good student of how that is done. There are means by which it is done. But as far as the city is concerned, I think it gets into the area of undue restrictions on alienability or the ability to sell property once it is
Seems like it could be a slippery slope to maybe even a form of housing discrimination. Is that kind of what we're trying to avoid with that stipulation?
That would be one consideration, certainly.
That makes perfect sense.
Incorrect. That's incorrect.
I'm sorry.
That's incorrect.
Just come up to the podium.
Yeah, please come up to the podium. Thank you.
The laws as they pertain to age-restricted housing, it is the only category that is legally acceptable. Generally, the mechanism is through the protective or covenants or the covenants, codes, and restrictions that they have as a homeowner As a homeowners association, it is enforced by the homeowners association. Our subdivision code, as one part of it, does require the protective covenants. They were required to forward protective covenants as part of this original. They have it now. They have a homeowners association now. I don't think it's active, but that is the mechanism. The city doesn't. It isn't a condition of a plat, directly, but as it pertains to approving the codes, covenants, and restrictions, that's where it's done. That's where it's done in there, and it's not, and it steers clear of any anti-discrimination housing stuff. They're actually HUD approves them. They're allowed through HUD.
Okay.
And that,
Thank you.
I would agree. I certainly knew it could be done, but had never done it and didn't know exactly how. I just knew the city
I
could
understand
not
what you mean.
independently do
I
it.
think we're going with, if it's implemented incorrectly, it could be problematic. Thank you. That makes sense. Well, are we ready for a motion, or are we?
There was one gentleman there.
Sorry, Greg Binkson again, legal counsel for the city. I'm not sure what Ms. Driscoll might be developing, but I do think, and I know she read through them, but we do want to be sure that you consciously consider those findings that are necessary to reaffirm those findings that are the basis for the approval of the variations. It's a little bit confusing that the code uses the term variation, I assume primarily to distinguish between variances in the zoning context, but in any time you're making exceptions under the otherwise applicable subdivision regulations, they're referred to as variations. But I do think we want to be sure that you as a body address whether or not you believe you can make those findings, and if so, articulate them. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good point. Was there another person that wanted?
Mr. Montgomery.
Mr. Montgomery? Were you wanting to speak? Because I kind of got the inclination that you were headed that direction before we had a recess.
I took the recess and relaxed.
Well, we still invite your perspective if you're willing to give it.
Spoke to the young man and commended him for being here, and this may teach him that he doesn't want anything to do. Or it may encourage him to learn what is happening here and needs to be corrected.
Thank you. So any more discussion? We're kind of trying to take the temperature. You guys, are you comfortable with a vote, or do we need to continue this?
I have a question. Is there any mechanism for a square footage limit on the housing in this process?
I think it comes under the covenants and HOA again. But actually, that brings up a question I have, because the topography and I think somebody made a comment about seeing like different architectural renderings and views. The applicant at this point is not required to provide that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted clarity on that for.
No, there are two distinguishing actions. I think what was being referred to is a planned development district, and through a planned development district, additional conditions can be added to that are more aesthetic-based and have some of those issues. But that means you have to be varying. A PDD is used when you need multiple variances from either the zoning or the land use regulations. And in this case, for the R1, the applicant is proposing a change to those lot sizes that are perfectly within that R1 zoning. But if they wanted to vary from that, I think one of the initial concepts had that lot width coming down to a 50-foot width instead of a 60-foot width. A 60-foot width is applicable within R1.
Okay.
And that was the very first meeting, was,
Yes.
Actually,
was it
second re-application of this, yes. So.
He wanted a PDD, but it, well, anyway. But now I don't think we can even entertain that, right?
I guess that type of application is based on what the applicant wants to apply for.
Right.
So,
It's a zoning change, basically, or,
well, it's
I don't know if
it's
it's
it's the choices available to an applicant. The applicant can either stay within the parameters of what is allowable in R1 and come back to you for that replat, but if they want to vary from something, then they either need to come and use a different method to do that. And a PDD is one way to do that, is to say, look, I'm willing to get into this level of detail in order to get a certain amount of variances, and it gives more control to that situation. But to try and force a developer to do that, if they have another alternative choices, it's not an and/or, it's the option that they choose to go forward with. But it can be a good alternative for complex situations.
So you'll pardon me if I maybe repeat some things, or I just kind of want to verbalize or kind of talk through some points. Please, by all means.
Thank you. Greg Binkson, legal counsel. In looking to the findings in the subdivision regs, I anticipated just wanting to be sure that we were following them literally, as you might imagine. There is a procedural requirement, however, that I do think we need to be sure that we address. Subsection C of that variations and exceptions provision provides that an application for any such variance shall be submitted in writing by the subdivider at the time when the preliminary plat is filed for the consideration of the Planning Commission. The applicant shall state fully the grounds for the variance and all of the facts relied upon by the petitioner. Obviously, we're not in a preliminary plat scenario, but in order to fulfill that procedural requirement, I do think we're in a situation where we should ask that the applicant request the granting of those variations in writing so that that could be processed, presented to you. And whether you wish to, when and how, under what circumstances you might wish to address those, I don't know how to suggest doing that other than by staffing that through, giving the applicant the opportunity to make that request if they so choose, and getting that before you.
I think that would also be advantageous to make sure that that material's in the packet, the public has had a chance to see those findings.
So we need to continue this for a later date.
I don't think we could approve the variations without having that submitted in writing, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's the concern. We obviously have to follow.
From a procedural point of view.
The legitimacy of your proceedings is dependent not only on your discretion, but your adherence to the processes. And
Absolutely.
Again, take responsibility for it not being called out previously, but just trying to make sure we address it correctly.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that sounds like we need to continue this for a later date.
So do we need a motion for the continuation?
Yes, and I think it would be important to recognize to continue this to a date certain. So your next Planning Commission meeting would be March 17th. So we would continue this item to March 17th.
Okay. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on the agenda, or are we
Nothing more from me, Mr. Chair.
free to convene then? Unless there's any Is there anybody in the public that wants to speak or verbalize their thoughts?
You do have public forum number 5.
Well, that's, yeah.
Wayne Montgomery, 2308 Village Lane, and the action you just took caused me to get where I want to speak again. I find it is interesting how we can complicate things to the point that nothing ever happens. And the more time that is given, it becomes more complicated. People have opportunities to draw their forces together and find something that causes then for a prolongation. The admonition was given to you to do your findings and make sure that those findings are all met. Then it is time for decision. I was on the County Planning Commission for 14 years and chaired it multiple times. The difficulty that we had was people that could never make a decision. And especially when they looked out and saw opposition. You're not here but to make decisions. And that can include a precedent wherever John went off to. Precedents can be effective and can be useful. But if you make a precedent, you can do that again as long as another opportunity meets that criteria perfectly. To establish a precedent is not a dishonor, it's not a thing that is to be afraid of, but it's to be able to know where you are and be able to stand by it in case it comes up again or someone wants to use it. Mr. Olson, several minutes ago, you suggested 2 issues. Let's get with it. Look at the time. I changed my television back to one that televises this meeting and the city commission meetings because I was missing seeing them. And our former city manager, I used to see him every now and then, and especially at McDonald's at night with his kids. And I would say, Jason, I almost stopped in McDonald's and brought you your breakfast because of the length the meetings were taking. Why do meetings take so long? Why? We can't make decisions. You had some good guidance tonight on decisions. And I suggest to you that you've just prolonged a decision that needed to be made so that everyone could settle to what the fact is and that the developer can get after what he has to do in order to fulfill his obligation and honor his position and protect protect his reputation in the community as being a good developer and one with vision. So, if you should go into this business, remember, the decision will always be prolonged as we let it. Secondly, there's always going to be, it's going to hurt my personal property value. I have never seen that happen. Never seen that happen. It's only in the mind of those who are unacquainted with what the reality is. And the other thing is to always follow the rules, the findings, and they have to be confirmed. So I regret this evening that you have made the decision to prolong this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I would like to add that I agree with you wholeheartedly with the exception that we are postponing this based on a legal roadblock, that we would, basically, there's a liability legally if we were to do a vote tonight. But other than that particular point, I couldn't agree with you more.
Why's it coming up tonight rather than months ago?
I don't have an answer for you for that, and, but thank you again for your thoughts. Appreciate it. So motion for adjournment?
I move.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.